Hey everyone, I'm super stoked for this video. I can finally showcase my Fezzari Timp Peak e-bike. So during my Hardtail for 2 month video, I did kind of tease out and showcase that I bought an e-bike. So today I'm going to be going over the specs, components, and then overall thought process on riding an e-bike. So let's dive into the geometry. This is a large frame. It has a reach of 485 millimeters, a stack height of 630.6 millimeters, a wheelbase of 1264.8 millimeters, chainstay of 437 millimeters, an effective seat tube angle of 77.5 degrees, and then a head tube angle of 63.5 degrees. Before we go any further, I do think it's important to talk about Fezzari's business model, which is direct to consumer. So basically what that means is, as a consumer buying a Fezzari bike, I am buying it directly from them, from the manufacturer. I'm not buying it from a dealer who gets it from a distributor, and that has a couple benefits right off the bat. Number one is it generally keeps costs down. So if you go through a distributor and a dealer, they're both trying to get profit off selling you a bike, versus if you go right from the manufacturer, they don't need to upsell anymore because they're making the one-time profit, right? And the main benefit, I believe, for a direct-to-consumer model is that the consumer gets a bike that fits them appropriately and a bike that has the components they want. So for the fit, Fezzari has a 23-point custom measurement, where as a consumer, you enter a whole bunch of different measurements about yourself, and then Fezzari will change things on the bike to match those measurements. The frame geometry doesn't change, but things like the cranks, like stem, the bar length, the amount of travel in the dropper post, all that stuff can get changed at the manufacturer, so when the consumer gets the bike, it fits them appropriately. For the component piece, I was able to call up Fezzari and tell them, hey, I really want XYZ on the bike. And then Fezzari was able to get those components and build it so that when I got the bike, one, it wasn't only the bike that fit me appropriately, but two, it was the bike that had all the components that I want. Therefore, I did not have to take off any brand new components and then swap them for things that I want, and then try and sell the brand new components on Facebook Marketplace, Pink Bike, any of that stuff. And I think that's just marvelous, right? And so now, knowing all that stuff, let's get into the actual build and components of the Fezzari Timp Peak. Let's jump into the cockpit, which has a lot of the custom built components that I asked Fezzari to do. So the first one being the P&W range handlebars, the P&W lever for the dropper post in that awesome fruit snack color, and then the P&W grips, which also have the fruit snack color, and then the P&W composite pedals, which also have the fruit snack color. Because I had those pedals, I wanted to make sure that the grips and the lever were also this color to kind of match all this stuff. So that was a really cool addition. The stem is the Fezzari FRT alloy, specifically sized to me. Through Fezzari's 23-point custom measurements, they got the stem just right. It feels really good, but again, I'm not quite sure the length. For the brakes, I'm running the TRP DHR Evos with 203mm rotors in the front and rear. These are stock on the bike, and the only other experience I have with these brakes is actually demoing the transition relay, and they feel quite similar to the SRAM codes, which I have, all of my biking experience have been on the codes. So I've loved these brakes. They've been able to stop 51-pound e-bike, so I really can't complain about these great brakes. The wheels are the DT Swiss H1900 29er tubeless Cushcore front and rear. When building the bike on Fezzari's website, you do have the option to install tubeless and Cushcore right out the gate. I only had tubeless installed because I didn't know if I wanted Cushcore or not. However, I did end up getting a flat tire in the rear after casing a couple jumps that were pretty huge, right? So I ended up installing Cushcore later on, and then because of the flat tire, I replaced the stock DHR2 with an Assegai. So I'm running the dual Assegai front and rear, which I just like that combo for the Pacific Northwest. And then the hubs are the DT Swiss 370s. I'm running the SRAM GX drivetrain, so that includes the derailleur, cassette, chain, and then the cranks are Shimano because of the motor. Let's move into the suspension of the bike. So for the fork, we're running the stock RockShox Zeb Ultimate RC2, 170 millimeters of travel. It's a phenomenal fork. It's my first time using it, but I know it's oftentimes on a lot of the high-end builds of other e-bikes, and so the fact that this is kind of stock is amazing. And also through Fezzari's 23-point custom setup, they got it kind of fit for my riding style, my weight, my height, all of that stuff. And they sent a little note to told me what pressure to put inside the fork. And I haven't changed a thing since I've been on it. It's been wonderful. Okay, let's talk about the rear shock, which was a massive change. So the stock Elite build is the RockShox Super Deluxe Air Shock. However, I'm a huge coil fan, so I actually wanted them to do the RockShox coil. However, that was not available at the time, and so Fezzari recommended the DVO Jade X. They said that all of their racers use this coil and have really good experience with it. I was a little hesitant because I've never heard of this company before, and I just had no experience with it. So I decided to trust them again because I like the coil, and they're the experts, right? I'm not. It is 170 millimeters, and I can tell you right now, I love it. I have nothing but good things to say about the suspension platform with the RockShox Zeb and the DVO Jade. The dropper post is the stock PNW Loam. This is set at 200 millimeters of travel, and it's also based on Fezzari's 23-point custom measurements. It's the best of both worlds for me. When it goes up, I'm in a really good climbing position, and then when it's slammed all the way down, it's as much out of the way as it can be. The saddle is the Soleil Italian Model X Superflow. Not the best saddle, but I haven't quite found one that fits me, so for the time being, it'll work. And for the e-bike portion, it is running the Shimano EP8 motor with a 635 watt-hour battery and 85 newton meters worth of torque. Again, the only other e-bike experience I have is with the Transition Relay, which was running the Fazua Ride 60 system, and so I'm really happy with the Shimano EP8. I love the power, I love the battery length. It has a little bit of a rattle, but you can't really notice it when you're out on the trails. That'll do it for the build of the bike. If there's anything that I left out or anything that you guys have questions on, please feel free to just put them in the comments below, and I'll be sure to reply to them. So now let's get into why I decided to buy an e-bike in the first place. The first reason is because this summer I knew I was going to have the opportunity to ride a lot, and so I wanted a way to ensure that I could ride almost every day without feeling totally exhausted and sore to the point where it was like unsafe to riding in the downhill. So having the e-bike essentially meant quote unquote no days off. The second reason is my home trail system is North Slope in Olympia, Washington, and all of these trails are accessed via a fire road climb. It's not an awful climb, but it does get tiring after 2 laps, and it's pretty annoying. So having an e-bike on this trail system just makes it everything more accessible, and again, it less kind of intrusive to other riders because I'm pretty much always on an access road. And the third reason is really simple. I just wanted more laps. Pedaling out at North Slope means I can get about 2 laps in and not be sore the next day, and that's kind of like just 2 trails. But on my Timp Peak, I can pretty much do all of the trails out here on 1 battery life, and that in and of itself is worth it. I'm just getting so much more time going downhill, and not feeling as sore the next day I can't explain the feeling. It's just incredible. And I do want to talk about the workout I still get. So I thought I was going to be coasting the whole time on the e-bike. I didn't think I was going to be sore or tired at all, but that's not actually the case. Because I'm going downhill so much more, I'm using those downhill muscles more. So my upper body feels it more, my legs feel it more, but different areas of my legs and upper body feel it as opposed to when I'm climbing. So I would kind of, if I were to try and explain this, it would be like on my analog bike, I'm doing more sprints. So I'm trying to essentially sprint up the mountain, putting in a ton more effort, and then I'm waiting at the top for that sprint and heart rate to calm down, and then I'll go downhill. On the Timp Peak, on the e-bike, it's less of a sprint up the hills and it's more of a gradual kind of marathon pace, because I'm not stopping nearly as much. I'm going from 1 downhill to 1 climb, another downhill, another climb, maybe taking a sip of water, another downhill, climb. I'm never really stopping. I'm going the whole time, and that, despite what anyone says, that does require effort, and I was feeling it towards the end, which is great. I was not expecting to get as good of workout as I have been, but for the people that say riding an e-bike is not a workout, you could probably make it that way if you're doing like an hour on full boost mode and that's it. You probably won't feel it, but that's not why I got the e-bike. That's not my use case. And so because of that, I am getting a workout, which feels good. Okay, so now let's get into how does this bike ride. First and foremost, I love it. It's very capable, getting me up the mountain and getting me down the mountain. It's the biggest bike I've ever ridden, both in terms of geometry and weight. Again, it's about 51 pounds for a full power e-bike, which is actually light for a full powered e-bike. The Timp Peak has an option to have a mullet configuration. I ended up going with the full 29er setup because I didn't want to make the reach super long. And this is also a setup that I'm not super familiar with. All my other bikes are mullet or full 27.5. However, I was really pleased at how quickly I felt comfortable on this bike. That might have also been due to the really short chainstay. It made me feel like I could maneuver the back end as if it had a 27.5 wheel, yet still have the full rolling capabilities of the 29er. The other thing that I found really pleasantly surprising is how good this bike feels at jumping. In my transition relay demo video, I felt like the jumping wasn't that good. Granted, I attributed that a lot to my jumping ability as a rider. Yeah, the Timp Peak has just felt extremely confidence-inspiring trying to pull for different jumps that I wouldn't normally try for on my analog bike, just with my jumping ability and where it's comfortable at. But again, I don't know if it's just the geometry, if it's the weight of the bike, the full 29er, but I was definitely pulling for jumps and trying to clear things more on the Timp Peak than I'd even try on my Yeti. So I think the general theme of this bike for me is just how confident, inspiring it really is. I've taken it on all kinds of trails, from blue flow trails to double black steep chutes with some technical terrain, and in all of those trails I felt very comfortable on the bike. Again, the full 29er, the 170 with the coil, how the geometry is set up, it's very confidence inspiring. Like, you could definitely race this bike, right? So I think if you're looking for an enduro race e-bike, this should definitely be on your list. If you're looking for something that is just a hard plow machine, this should also be on your list. It's not a trail bike, right? So I think if you're going to be doing just strictly flow trails, there might be bikes that may make those flow trails a little bit more fun with just less travel and more of like a trail e-bike. But I would definitely recommend, like, if you're doing some technical stuff, if you're going to be getting steep and trying to, you know, just do some gnarly stuff, this bike is absolutely impeccable. It also climbs really well. The seat position just feels good going up all these access roads and some of the single track that I've taken it on. There is some rattle from the Shimano EPA, but I've heard that's pretty consistent across bikes using that motor, and I don't notice it on the rides. And I haven't changed the e-bike motor settings because the torque feels really good just right out the box. And that screen is pretty nice, also provides some good info. However, I do wish it had the exact percentage of battery I have left instead of just showing the 20% bars. Also, shout out to the Fezzari customer support team. They've been super good about answering all my questions. I ended up chipping paint while building the bike, and they sent me some free touch-up stuff because they knew like how sucky it is to get a new bike and have some chips in the paint. The only complaint I have is that their website said it'd take like 1 to 2 weeks to build it up, but it took closer to a month. However, that might have been due to all the custom components. So shout out to Fezzari. So I do want to take a moment and talk about e-bike etiquette. Since I've had the bike, I haven't had any negative interactions. I've had a couple kind of questionable looks, but nothing that was outright mean or offensive in any way. Whenever I'm climbing and I have to climb on an actual trail, I just remember that if I'm going to pass somebody, I need to give them ample amounts of time, and I need to communicate with them effectively, so I'm not putting pressure on them to move over. I'm not tailgating them, and I'm not the one kind of controlling the situation. I'm letting them know, hey, I'm here, my presence is known. Whenever it's convenient and a good time for you, I would like to pass. There's also some controversy about where e-bikes are allowed. I don't see how e-bikes destroy trails. It's definitely not like a motorcycle. So I've been kind of riding them pretty much everywhere I've ridden my analog bike. I just remember that whenever I'm coming across other bikers that may not be on e-bikes, just don't be a jerk. Riding an e-bike is a privilege. You never want to make snide, snickery comments to people, especially if you are climbing and you are passing somebody and it's a really steep climb. You don't need to make any sort of comments about it being easier on an e-bike, or oh, I'll see you at the top in an hour, like, or hey, I'm gonna lap you here in a sec. You don't need to make any of those comments, okay? Now, if the person that you are passing that's on an analog bike, if they say something like, oh man, you've got the cheat code, honestly, that's totally justifiable. Like, an e-bike on a climb is a cheat code. I do think it's still a workout, but it's a cheat code, okay? So at the end of the day, just don't be a jerk. As a disclosure, I'm not sponsored by Fezzari or any other bike company for that matter, so all of the thoughts and opinions that I've mentioned in this video are mine alone. Granted, I did pull some information and share some graphics directly from Fezzari's website, just to ensure that when I am speaking about the company, I'm trying to do so in as most accurate way as I can. So that'll do it for a lot of the content piece. I know this is a long one. We're approaching 16 minutes now, so thanks everyone for tuning in. If there's something that I've left out, or if you have other thoughts, comments, questions, things like that, please just put them in the comment section below, and I'd love to have a dialogue with you. I know when I was doing my e-bike research, a big thing that I wanted to know about was the range. I found that the range just varies greatly on bike, riding style, rider weight, just it varies so much. So just for a real quick context, I did a ride a couple days ago out at North Slope. It was about 2 hours and about 5 minutes or so. I did 5,000 feet of climbing, and I still had roughly 35-40% of my battery left. It was mostly in eco mode. I used a little bit of trail and boost mode, but again, it's just so hard to do range. If that's something that people are interested in, I'm happy to put together a video and do some more tests about that. Please just let me know in the comment section below. So again, thanks everyone for watching. Don't forget, the most important trail of the day is the next one, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video. Thanks everyone.